wanted to bring today's episode to the podcast talking all about how to improve your chances of pregnancy success when you're in your 40s, especially if you have low AMH and or high FSH. Maybe you've been dealing with repeat loss, what you can do to really fast track this. And this is you may be feeling that you've been told that you've got to rush to IVF, or maybe you've been told that donor eggs are the only option. But what is it you can do right now to improve your chances of pregnancy success, taking your health into your own hands? Excited for you to listen. Let's go. Hey, Katy, excited to have you back on the podcast.
Hey, Sarah.
Here we are. Okay, so we're going to be talking all about how to improve pregnancy success in your 40s. So we see a lot of people that are in their 40s, they have low AMH and or high FSH. They might have been trying, sometimes they're trying for its secondary fertility issues, no problem having their first child, and all of a sudden they're struggling with their second for a number of years. And obviously having a pregnancy can deplete your nutrient status and your vital reserves. And so, what's happening there. And then also, many times people have, delayed having their family, and now all of a sudden maybe they didn't even want one. And now at the age of 40, that biological clock just kind of takes in. And sometimes we see many people actually that are reaching out to us that are single by choice, and they're like, the relationship thing, I'm not waiting around for this. I need to take action. And we've got, a partner, maybe a new partner, or even maybe another partner is like, I want to wait a little bit. But as a woman in your 40s, we don't have time to wait. It is the fertility industry will have you panicking and worrying that your fertility is falling off a cliff at the age of 40. And that's the exact opposite of where you want to be, in this panic state, worrying. That is not going to how you're going to, receive your child. So let's kind of talk about, some of the risks of, to the mother, to the woman for over 40, like what things to think about. And I think some of these things we know, but let's just kind of chat about them.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to speak and acknowledge this stuff. So it's not without risk to have babies after 40. And so, yes, we are thinking about things like egg health, but we are just thinking about generally pregnancies over 40 tend to be a bit higher risk. So a lot of the time we're seeing pregnancies that are quite heavy on the medical management side of things. So when we say higher risk, what we mean is higher risk for pregnancy loss. So, and that includes miscarriage and also stillbirth, unfortunately. And then also higher risk for things, so pregnancy complications for the woman. So gestational diabetes tends to be higher, preeclampsia, which is when your blood pressure shoots up and gets out of control. And then also at higher risk for placental issues as well. And then probably one of the more well-known risk factors is that Down syndrome is generally higher. There's a higher incidence of Down syndrome in older mothers, and also the accuracy of their Down syndrome testing can be less reliable. So it's hard to say some of these things because we want to be encouraging and we want to be supportive, but we do also just need to acknowledge that there are some greater risks. And I think really the takeaway from that just being that, okay, it's probably more important to focus on our overarching health than ever if you are planning on having children over 40.
Yeah, and the good news is with the gestational diabetes and preeclampsia, some of those conditions, there's lots of diet and lifestyle changes we can do to prevent that piece. We just interviewed Helen from Grow Baby, so definitely go back and check that episode. It's a couple of episodes before this, and talking all about how the specific gene variants and what are the diet and lifestyle and supplements that we can then support pregnancy outcomes, improve pregnancy, improve your preconception health. So there's things you can do, which is empowering. When you just sit back and go, oh my goodness, diabetes runs in my family, I'll probably get gestational diabetes, there's nothing I can do. No. There's lots of things you can do.
Yeah, and actually, Sarah, you just reminded me on that note, specifically around the gestational diabetes, because I wrote an article on this recently. It is that actually one of the best ways to mitigate risk for gestational diabetes is to pick up on imbalanced blood sugars before you get pregnant. So a lot of gestational diabetes is actually just undiagnosed diabetes, or undiagnosed higher risk for diabetes that then develops in pregnancy when our metabolic state changes. So actually, through doing your health testing and blood tests and these kind of things beforehand to get a sense of your overall health status before you get pregnant, it makes a huge difference.
Yeah, the next one is the egg quality. So Kay and I have done an episode specifically on egg quality. This would then apply to people over 40 as well. But let's kind of just talk on that, speak on that briefly about. So really, people always want to improve their egg quality. Everything we do, and from a functional and nutrition standpoint, and our Fab Fertile method is really focusing on that, and that improves your egg quality, which improves the follicles, your AMH, your FSH, all of your levels, because we're not focusing in on the AMH and the FSH. We're looking at the other biomarkers. And if you have a blood sugar issue, a sluggish liver, or you've got low vitamin D, which is linked to studies link that to low AMH. All those biomarkers, when you start to work on those, that's going to improve the egg quality. But let's kind of just talk a little bit about that for someone in their 40s. Anything to share there?
Yeah, so it's just that reminder really that the egg quality is the main contributing factor when it comes to both getting and staying pregnant. At any age, but particularly over 40, really. Even over 35 is when it can start to dwindle. So I think if that's not a priority and something that you're thinking of now, then it's something to start paying attention to. And it's really just thinking about the egg and the sperm. These are what we would call the gametes, and they are what create your baby. Like, these are the cells from which DNA is replicated, and so they contain the magic formula from which a baby is made. And if that egg quality deteriorates over time, because all cells are subject to cellular aging, right? I'm sure a lot of us have heard of cellular or metabolic aging. Like, we can't stop the aging process, but we can slow it down, and so a lot of the time, I know my husband, we have this set of scales at home, these metabolic scales, right? And my husband is obsessed with his, and he takes pride in the fact that he has a metabolic age of 22 or something like that. And but these numbers do matter, because they are a sign of risk factors for future disease. And so our cellular health, which is what we're referring to when we're talking about egg quality, that does matter when it comes to actually transmitting and replicating DNA.
Yeah, absolutely. And that 90 days to renew the egg, and the life cycle of the sperm, 70 to 80 days. So in a short period of time, you can make massive change with your health and your egg quality. Okay, let's talk about diet then. Like, we have talked a lot about diet. Obviously, if you're here, you do the elimination diet, take out the top allergens, systematically reintroducing them. So it's dairy, gluten, soy, corn, peanuts, eggs, processed sugar, alcohol, 10 days, reintroduce over 30. If there's an issue, stop the food for 60 to 90. You want to take out dairy and gluten for 60 and 90 days. To fast track this, tweak it with testing, with food sensitivity testing, gut testing, and genetics. But from a generalized kind of piece like that'll give you the personalized approach. But let's talk about some of the foods to add into your diet when you're eating, because that's you're taking out those top allergens, but you're still eating a lot of food.
Yeah, absolutely. And so food, as with all parts of our body and health, food has the potential to help or hinder our bodies and our overarching health. And so if we can prioritize foods, so one of the things that you mentioned there, Sarah, was eliminating certain foods. And the reason for that is because certain foods might be causing an inflammatory response to your body. So we want to avoid, where possible, foods that are going to be driving an inflammatory response, because if that inflammatory load is high, then it puts pressure on all of the rest of the body. And so long as your body is fighting inflammation, which is a top priority, then it's not going to be prioritizing reproductive health or that cellular regeneration that comes with egg health and other cells in the body. So, in terms of foods that we do want to include, I mean, I think foods to avoid is a bit more nuanced because it kind of depends on the individual. There's not, there are some key players. Sugar is generally considered an inflammatory food. It's not, it's nice. It's an enjoyable food, but it is inflammatory. But in terms of foods that are helpful, then really it is just always going back to the basics of a whole food diet and having foods that grow in nature and ideally haven't been exposed to a load of pesticides. And things like nuts and seeds and legumes and certain whole grains, and then things that were once alive, right? So animals as well, they are really sustaining for our body, and healthy fats too. So I think now more than ever, yes, it is about the foods that we eat in terms of what we put in, but it is also being mindful of how that food has been treated, as in, has it been chemically treated in the case of plants, but also has it been, if you're eating an animal, then what has the diet of that animal been, and what medications have they been exposed to in their lifetime, like antibiotics and hormones and these kind of things. So yes, step one, get the whole foods diet down, and then step two is to try and then be more mindful about where those foods have come from.
Exactly. And let's just kind of touch on some mitochondria health. We did talk about this when we were doing the episode with the egg quality, so definitely refer back to that. But the mitochondria health and sort of the powerhouses of the cell, let's talk about that.
Yeah, so mitochondria refers to the part of the cell that is the energy center. So when we are referring, and the gametes, so the egg and the sperm, they are some of the cells in the body that have the highest concentrations of mitochondria. So because they've got a really important job to do, right? Because actually our bodies are always ultimately geared to, whether we choose to have children or not, our bodies are still geared towards reproduction. So they're really important cells, and they're treated like gold in the body. And a part of that is that they have this high degree of mitochondria. So really, by eating that whole foods diet, having plenty of healthy fats in your diet as well, so really being mindful of the type of fats that you're eating, eating those antioxidants in your diet as well. So always just thinking about the rainbow every day, from those bright, vibrant reds and oranges to your greens and purples and blues and whites and browns, even, all of those colors in our diet contribute to our antioxidant health, which again can help with that mitochondrial health. And then just things like staying hydrated and just keeping on top of your nutrient status and making sure. I mean, we see people that come to us with, on paper, a really great diet, but then we do blood work and it's just like, oh my goodness, like, how are you so depleted? And there's all sorts that can deplete our nutrient status, from our gut health, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a second, through to our stress levels. All of those things matter.
Yeah, and the seed oils too that we're all consuming, canola and safflower and peanut and um, grapeseed or rapeseed, all those different seed oils which causing inflammation in our body. I know, and I was doing this. Oh man, I was doing this Earth Balance butter, and I'm like, but there's canola oil in it, right? And you're like, okay, it's vegan butter, but yeah. So the other day I had a little, it was like a little gluten-free bagel thing, but I put, it was like duck, I guess, what do you call it? Duck
Lard.
lard? Yeah, because lard is pork, tallow is
Yeah.
beef, and
Yeah.
duck stuff, duck
Duck
fat,
stuff.
fat,
Duck fat. Yeah,
duck
there we go.
fat on my, and then I put a little garlic and salt and it melted and it was good. And yeah, and so it's not a, and so because I was trying to find like because for me when I have the grass-fed butter here, because if it's not raw, and I was figuring, I'm like, well, how do I gotta make my own butter? I don't know what the heck, but because it's here and can't. If I go to Europe and have dairy, I'm fine. But something about in North America, when I have dairy here, it doesn't work for me. So even the grass fed butter that should be good. I guess homogenized, because I was looking at this homogenized versus raw. Homogenized is still pasteurized, and then it can still have like in that processing side of things still have issues, but staying away from the seed oils, which is a real tricky one. So it's not about hiding away in the house and never going out because they're going to use some vegetable oil and things like that, but just on a daily basis, not exposing yourself to it.
Yeah, I think that's a really important message, Sarah. It is to reinforce that we're not looking at becoming hermits and never socializing again, right? This is about what you do the majority of the time. So if you can create habits at home in your cooking, in the ingredients in your cupboard, and then maybe, I don't know, if you go out to work, for example, rather than working from home, then maybe you're mindful about taking lunches with you and those kind of things, so that on a daily basis, you know what's going into your body. Then there's wiggle room, right? You can go out and enjoy a meal with friends without feeling petrified that there might be some vegetable oil in it. Okay. So this isn't about living your life terrified, but it is about just thinking, okay, what am I doing the majority of the time? And our bodies are resilient. Our bodies are metabolically resilient, and that's amazing. But where it backfires is if we're doing the health hindering stuff every day and we've got those things going into our body every day, then it's just like chinks in the armor constantly, and eventually it wears us down. Whereas if we can do the opposite and build up that armor and know that we've got these solid foundations, then it means that we've got the armor in place to defend against it when we do have exposure to something on occasion that isn't necessarily serving our health.
Yeah, because hiding ourselves away and not seeing our friends, that's then going to impact our stress levels because and especially when sometimes when we're on the fertility journey, we kind of pull away from our social circles, especially if they have children or people are pregnant and gender reveals and, baby showers, all that stuff can be painful. And then we pull away and then that impacts us negatively. So obviously you got to figure out who it is that's the best to hang out with. But if you're like, ooh, I can't even go out to eat now because I can't have seed oil, gluten, and a whole bunch of other stuff like that, we need to weigh the positives and the benefits of the positives and negatives of those. Okay, blood sugar. We've done many talks on blood sugar. This is something that we see all the time, and how stress, obviously, and then poor sleep can impact blood sugar levels. And you sort of start the day off on a little carb party, and then maybe you start with a muffin or a pancake or oatmeal or something, then your blood sugar is on a roller coaster all day long. That can impact your cycle, your ovulation. We see it a lot. And then also, the gestational diabetes for when you do get pregnant. So being able to balance the blood sugar, having enough protein, I think you want like 80 to 100 grams of protein a day, and then having enough fats to go along with it. And when you do that, you're not as hungry, like you're satiated. So maybe talk a little bit about blood sugar there.
Yeah, I like what you said there, because a lot of people at breakfast in particular, it's people are really attached to their Western foods at breakfast, right? And here, loads of people here rely on things like cereal and toast for breakfast, or porridge. And I'm sure it's the same for many listeners. And I'm often up against a lot of resistance when people, it's like, wait a minute, even if I had even if I did have eggs or whatever it is for breakfast, I still need to have my bread. But actually, what I found is, since I completely eliminated any kind of bread with my breakfast and just had vegetables and protein and fat at breakfast, I am not hungry for hours after that. And people would look at that and think it's an incomplete plate. Like, where's the carbs? And I'm not saying that I'm not advocating low carb here, but for some people, especially at the start of the day, the thing that you break your fast with, that's what sets the precedent for the rest of the day in terms of your blood sugars. So if you're getting an energy slump. I mean, for me now it's 3:30 p.m. So a lot of people, that's classic energy slump time, right? That's when they might reach for the caffeine, reach for the sugar treats, all of those kind of things. If you are an energy dip kind of person in the middle of the afternoon or late in the afternoon, it's not what's happening there that matters. It's what happened at the start of the day. Because if you got on that blood sugar roller coaster at breakfast, then you're on it for the whole day. And the biggest slump typically is mid-afternoon. So it's, yeah, breakfast really important. Blood sugar is really important because it's one of the key drivers that we see for that inflammatory load. Because if our bodies have certain systems that need to be tightly regulated, and for the sake of our livelihood, our life being kept, and blood sugar is one of those. So the body has got lots of alarm systems in place and mechanisms that put us on high alert if the blood sugars go. I'm not talking diabetic ranges here, but I'm just talking about if we're up down up down up down all the time, the body's going to be on high alert. And when we're trying to conceive, and particularly when we're trying to protect the health of our eggs and our hormones, we want to be giving the body the message, hey, it's safe. We're good. We are good, because there is a hell of a lot of energy that goes into creating a baby, and our bodies just ain't going to do it or prioritize it if they expect that it's, that they're in an unsafe environment. And that's one of the ways it can deem it's unsafe.
Yeah, that's where a continuous glucose monitor might be helpful, doing that for months to see that maybe like rice will spike it, or maybe, sweet potato, or so then you can kind of really personalize that diet. So being able to look at that for a month. And then obviously if you're over 40s, we're talking about here, maybe for your whole 20s or your 20s and 30s, you've been on this roller coaster. And so so if someone's been having blood sugar issues for years, and then obviously stress impacting it, sleep impacting it. To be able to start making those shifts. Anything you wanted to comment there for someone who maybe they have a history of diabetes, and here we are in our 40s and we're trying to, is there anything else you wanted to share? That I think that that continuous glucose monitor can really quickly tell you, oh wait, that muffin is sending your blood sugar sky high. You'll see the data.
Yeah, and you touched on something important there in terms of age too, Sarah, which is that once for women, once we get to our 40s and beyond, there are metabolic shifts that happen. So 40 plus is a classic time of our lives that I get women come to me saying, oh my goodness, I'm not doing anything differently, but my body's just started laying down all these fat stores around my middle, and I'm doing the same, or maybe even I'm eating less and I'm exercising more, and I'm still laying down these fat stores around my tummy. And so if that's you, then the reason for that, or there's a lot of reasons, but one of the main reasons for that is because of the natural metabolic shifts that happen at this age. And whilst you can't do anything to prevent that, what you can do is be mindful. And instead of saying, oh, well, everything has taught me that in order to lose weight, I must eat less and exercise more. It's more about saying, this is to do with the way my body tolerates carbohydrates. And so it's actually then about thinking, well, how do I adapt my diet? Maybe you do want to use a continuous blood sugar monitor to get to know your own body, and experiment with that. But the hacks on the blood sugar piece are what you break your fast with matters in the morning or whenever you have your first meal of the day. So making sure that you have fiber and protein and fat at that time. And then really just with any carbohydrate based meals that you're having, make sure that you are checking the dots for fiber, protein and fat, rather than having naked carbs, because they will spike your blood sugar.
Okay, the next is gut health. We've done lots of episodes on gut health, so definitely you can refer that for a deeper dive. But so when we do the diet changes, it's important to, in conjunction, just to heal the gut, because we see a lot of people with parasites, bacterial infections, fungal infections, passing fluids back and forth. So many times if you're in your 40s, if you have low AMH and high FSH, it's not just about you working on your gut health. Your partner does too, because maybe he's got an infection and you're passing it back and forth. But essentially, that's what's going to help. So the health of the gut microbiome is highly tied to the health of the ovaries. Anything you want to share there?
Yeah, I think it's really just again thinking about what we see are the key patterns in terms of our bodies trying to protect themselves and keep themselves safe. And one of those key drivers is blood sugars that we just mentioned, and another really common area in the body that is subject to inflammation is the gut. And hey, that's because we've got things going into, most people eat 3+ times a day and we're drinking, and so it's there's stuff from the outside world coming into our bodies every single day via the gut. And that means that it is subject to all sorts of exposure to all sorts of bacteria and pathogens and, as you say, potentially parasites or whatever else it might be. And actually it's got some really the gut when it's functioning well, has got some really robust protective mechanisms like our stomach acid. But for a lot of people, our stomach acid is not that great. And especially once you start getting to 40, and beyond, then stomach acid naturally starts to deplete too. So then, hey, we've got our nutrient status, which is not working very well. And then also, it's not doing the job it's meant to, which is killing off some of those bacterial load. So we end up, the bacteria ends up traveling down to our large intestine, which is a place that we want bacteria, but only certain types of bacteria. And so then again, if our gut is constantly having to be fighting and dealing with some of the inflammatory byproducts that these bacteria are giving off, then again, once again, it's not going to be prioritizing reproductive health.
Yeah, and sometimes, so with the stomach acid, maybe you need help with digestive enzymes, with bitters, or with apple cider vinegar before your meal to get that going. Obviously, if there's like low stomach acid, we want to look for infections there too. Sometimes people are put on these, protein pump inhibitors, and you're on these, you've got GERD, and you're on these acid blockers for years, and that because you think you have all this excess acid. Well, it's usually the opposite where you have low. Anything you want to say there?
Yeah, it's a complicated one because one of the key drivers for like GERD and reflux is actually not having enough stomach acid. And I know that sounds a bit counterintuitive, but it's to do with the valve at the top of our stomach. And actually, if we don't have enough acid, then that valve can get a bit loose and then push the acid that is there up into esophagus, and it's very uncomfortable. And so more than ever, I mean, why is this happening? Stress is a huge one. Antibiotics over the lifetime is a huge one. Other medications, and again, we're not anti-medications here, but it's just the exposure that we have to some of those things and toxins in general that can deplete those stomach acid secretions. And also, I mean, how many of us don't chew our food properly? How many of us are eating on the go, eating at our desks, trying to get our to-do list done while we're eating? That is not conducive to good digestion or good stomach acid. And if we're doing that, and we always have food hitting the stomach before the acid has had a chance to fire up, then again, that can backfire.
Yeah, and it's basically, and it's not about doing like parasite cleanses and all these different, generalized recommendations. Because if we're in our 40s, like time is of the essence. We want to fast track that. That's why we like a stool test so you get the DNA of the stool. So because you can eat this most pristine, beautiful, gluten-free, dairy-free diet, but if you've got an infection in there, maybe you're not absorbing all your nutrients. That can impact your ovarian health, your AMH, your FSH, your body's ability to implant. So we need to address the infections and in a targeted manner. Like our protocols are usually 3 to 4 months. And then you can really fast track this piece. Stress. Again, we've done lots of episodes on stress. Lately, I've been seeing, interesting, like in the CRP, the inflammation marker. So basically, you want that below usually 1 or 1.5. I've been seeing it a lot higher in people lately. Obviously, that can be issues with, your cardiac health, as well as is there like insulin resistance, heavy metals, things like that going on. Anything you want to say about stress or the CRP, anything on there?
Yeah, I think you've said most of it around CRP. There's lots that can tie into that. So CRP is a marker of inflammation. It doesn't mean that if your CRP is below 1 that you have no inflammation, because there are lots of markers of inflammation. But often, yeah, if it is raised, then it can be a risk factor for cardiovascular disease. And so we want to then be thinking about, well, what are your cholesterol markers doing, for example, and your lipids, and then in turn your thyroid and your liver, because all of those organ systems matter in relation to CRP and inflammatory load. So we would be checking all of those things. And also on the stress piece, I mean, I've alluded to stress, I think, on most every topic we've covered today, and also in previous episodes. Stress underpins everything. If our body, again, thinking about these mechanisms that our bodies have in place to protect us and keep us safe and alive, which is the top priority, if our bodies perceive that we are in danger, it doesn't matter if it's real danger or just modern day stressors, it's our body reacts in the exact same way, and that is to prioritize the fight or flight response, which is great for running away from a tiger or fighting a bull, but it's not so great for our everyday health, and particularly fertility, because it will send all of our resources to those emergency functions, or the perceived emergency functions, and it will stop focusing on digestion, on reproductive health, because it doesn't, our bodies don't want to produce if they sense danger. So there's so many ways in which stress impacts the body. We've just some brand new research that just came out has literally found a place in the brain, a part of the brain that is like a dial, whereby our stress levels directly impact inflammation, and that's huge. So it really does underpin everything. And I know it's easier to say, well, don't be stressed, when the modern world is full of stressors, but actually it's about really taking a look at your own life and how you handle things and what your response to things is, and building on that emotional resilience, because no one's going to do that for you. You need to get those practices in place to do it.
Yeah, and that's why having a guide to really help you fast track this, right? So because sometimes we can't really see someone to help you see around corners, see patterns, see what it is you're doing to kind of derail yourself. Because our whole thesis on this, is it actually early menopause? Because we worry in our 40s that this is what we're slipping into. Oh my goodness, I've got hot flashes. Now the AMH is low. They're telling me I got to rush to IVF, and now they're whispering to me perhaps it's donor eggs, like all this panic. Is it your adrenals? The adrenals impact the thyroid, which then impacts your AMH, your FSH, your follicle count, your body's ability to implant. So all that piece. So there's obviously the mental, emotional side of things. And people will tell me, you know what, I feel pretty good. My stress level on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm at about a 2 or a 3. 10 being the highest, 1 being the lowest. Other time people are like, I'm at a 12. So either you're doing well mentally, emotionally, or and then maybe it's your body that's struggling with the food sensitivities and the blood sugar imbalance and a gut infection, and maybe you got thyroid dysfunction, or it's you're super stressed as well, adding that on top of all the biochemical side of things. Bottom line, there's things you can do about it, and the body comes in when it, like you're saying, when it feels safe. Because if you're up here in the parasympathetic, in the fight or flight, panicking, body's like, I don't think so. I need to keep you alive, and it'll deprioritize reproductive health. So that's where we're getting very honest about those stressors is key. Okay, so the male partner, we've done many episodes on the health of the male partner. That's the myth that the semen doesn't decline with age. So one would expect if you're in your 40s, your partner is in his 40s as well. So it's really important to 40s or 50s. It's really important to, or maybe you have a younger man, that's fine too, but we still need to look at his health, because we could have chronological age and, biological age. Some 20-year-olds 40-year-olds are healthier than 20-year-olds, but based on what it is they're eating and their lifestyle. So we need to look at his blood chemistry, making sure his semen is optimal, not just about myopically focusing in on the woman's egg health. Anything you want to say there?
Yeah, I think everything that you just said, Sarah, and then just to add that whilst there's not a strict cutoff point, so there's not many women at 50 that are having babies, whereas there are some men that are able to father children in their 50s and even beyond. So it's not outside of the realms of the possibility that older men can father children. But what does matter is yes, to say that our biological age does matter. So you could get a man in his 20s that is older biologically than a man in his 40s or 50s because of the lifestyle, but also to say that if you are in your 40s as a woman and you are taking on the load of all of this, first of all, there's the resentment piece. You don't deserve to take on the full load. And secondly, is that actually, imagine if you do everything and you do all of this work and you get your infection sorted and everything else, and everything's identified and picked up on, and then it turns out that there's an issue on the male side, then you're running out of time. Right. So we want to be doing this in tandem, in conjunction with one another.
Yeah, giddy up. And most partners are open, willing, ready, like, tell me what they basically, they're like, tell me what I need to do. Like sometimes they don't even know what it is they can do, because they're like, wait, my semen's normal, but there's things we can do to optimize it. So next we'll talk a little bit about some supplements. We have done a deep dive on the next one, omega-3, like a full episode on it. So we're going to talk on that, how really making sure you're taking an omega is really important for women in their 40s. So it's associated with improving egg quality for women. So did you want to talk a little bit about that one, Katie?
Yeah, as you were talking, I'm just reminded of how many amazing podcasts we've done. With every single thing so far, we're like, we've done an episode on it. So I'm sure there'll be lots of episodes to refer back to if you're listening to this. But yeah, so omega-3, I mean, this comes back to the mitochondrial health predominantly, because omega-3 is it's a really great type of fat, and fat is what our omega-3s and fatty acids are what our mitochondria love to thrive off of. And so yeah, it's just, I mean, a really good quality omega-3, I would say, is an essential part of your fertility journey, regardless of age, but particularly if you're over 40, because it is associated with improved egg quality.
I think the next one, the coenzyme CoQ10, coenzyme Q10, people know to take that. There's studies that came out that women over 40 that it had helped improve egg quality. So this is one of our foundational supplements. Again, we've done a whole deep dive on CoQ10 and why this is so important. Do you want to just talk about that one as to why they need to take it?
Yeah, only insofar as, again, it's associated with mitochondrial health and that energy. So CoQ10 helps with our energy production. So ATP in the body is like a unit of energy. And so our mitochondria are quite heavy on the usage of ATP, and coenzyme Q10 feeds into that. And it's also it's an antioxidant as well. So it's protective. And really, the more especially in a world where there is a lot of oxidative stress coming from all the things that we've spoken about in terms of the modern day world, then anything that we can do to give our body support with that antioxidant status, the better. So yeah, it's really important, and the quality of the CoQ10 matters as well. There's a lot of CoQ10 out there that is not, and this goes for omega-3 as well, any fat-based nutrient, that the quality really matters.
The next one, vitamin A. Anything you wanted to say about helping women over 40 with egg health?
Yeah, so vitamin A is one of, again, we're on a bit of a theme here with the good fats, right? So vitamin A is a fat-soluble nutrient, along with E and D and K. And it's, again, it's a vitamin that is a little bit lacking in a lot of our modern diets, because it's found in highest concentrations in organ meats and parts of the animal that we don't really like to eat so much anymore. So our diets aren't that rich in it anymore. We do have vitamin A converted from beta carotene. So beta carotene that comes from leafy greens and orange vegetables and fruits, that can convert to vitamin A in the body, but not so readily. not quite as easily. So actually, what we are finding is that a lot of people are depleted in vitamin A, and just like with the other fat soluble nutrients that we mentioned, really important for that egg quality, and also the blastogenesis, which is an important part of early embryo development. So again, just making sure that I know there's a bit of controversy around vitamin A because it's deemed unsafe in pregnancy for a lot of people, but actually, so long as you're not overloading on the vitamin A and you're keeping within a safe level, it is a super important nutrient.
Adding in a liver supplement in there too, perhaps like an liver organ supplement can be helpful.
Yeah.
Folate, so making sure that your prenatal has methylfolate, that can help with fertilization, implantation, making sure your folate levels are at the right status. Anything we've done a deep dive into prenatals and why you don't want folic acid, which is a synthetic form. You want methylfolate because sometimes over 60 to 80% of the population has the MTHFR gene variant mutation. So the gene variant, you may not be able to then assimilate that folic acid. We also can see to support on your methylation pathways on our genetics test if you need what additional Bs you need with the B vitamins, choline, what's needed there. Anything you want to say about folate?
Yeah, just the whole folate cycle. So the folate, the nutrient, um, feeds into what we call the folate cycle, which is a part of a bigger methylation cycle. And one of the roles of methylation is gene transcription. That's why it is super important in the context of making a baby, and even more so given some of the risk factors we spoke about right at the start of the podcast today of pregnancy loss and infertility generally. Then folate plays a hugely important role in that ability to methylate, which in turn impacts our ability to regenerate cells and to transcribe genes.
And then zinc, we see this on we do a hair tissue mineral analysis test, and we can see that sometimes copper is high, and copper and zinc are two cofactors that kind of go together. One's off, the other one can be off too. So anything you want to say about zinc? That's really important for male and female fertility.
Yeah, really important for male and female fertility. It's often an underlooked nutrient. Again, it's mostly found in animal products, and we're seeing a lot of vegetarians and vegans now. It's harder to get, I think. And again, there are signs that we can see where someone's zinc status might be low. And a lot of the time, if someone's showing signs of low stomach acid, then their zinc might be low. If someone's got low liver enzymes, then their zinc might be low, because our bodies need zinc to be able to produce those things. But yeah, zinc really important for mitochondrial health and for hormone production.
And then the whole underpinning of all of this is that maybe you could be well fed but malnourished, and you've got this poor nutrient status where you're eating all these beautiful healthy foods, but you're not actually absorbing it. And so we can see on your blood work where do you need support with magnesium, with iron, with vitamin A, all the different nutrients there. Vitamin D, where do you need support? And because we could be taking some of these generalized recommendations, and we need to do this in a very targeted manner, because when you're in your 40s, this is not the time to mess around and do generalized recommendations. We need to look at your blood work and then develop a plan and address infections, figure out the diet that's right for you, and then look at your genes to even personalize it even more. But with the poor nutrient status, anything you wanted to share there?
Yeah, just really that when we were looking over these notes at the start of the session, one of the themes that was clear was that in some of these nutrients that are really important, it might be that there is just a depleted nutrient status picture. And when we do blood work comprehensively and we start to get a sense of someone, one of the biggest themes that I see coming up is, You can see it mapped out, right? You can see, oh, this is just very clearly a depletion picture. And so if someone has a great diet, but maybe they don't necessarily have a great diet, maybe that's something to work on. But if someone does have a great diet and they've got a depletion picture and poor nutrient status, then we need to delve into why that is, because there's a lot of possible reasons. So I think overall, when someone is in their 40s and trying to get pregnant, then really never is there a more important time to get that personalized approach, because if it's not happening for you, then do you really want to be wasting more time, and doing generalized approaches when actually we could be getting some real answers and working on those.
Exactly. Yeah. So bottom line, there's things we can do to improve, egg and sperm health when we're in our 40s, and the fertility. Obviously, we don't want to be blind to the age and things like that, but there's things we can do to optimize our health and improve pregnancy outcomes, improve our preconception health. Any final thoughts here for us, Katie?
No, other than to say, just go back and listen to those amazing podcast episodes that we referred to if you haven't already, because there's tons of in-depth information on those too.
Awesome. Great. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.